All right, hello, we are live tonight. This is the movie discussion pocket dimension where time does not exist, and the only thing that matters is film. As always, I'm Cole, joined by Jay, and our this is a lighter theme, it's not a hard theme, but our soft theme of sort of winter continues this week with another foreign film, but one of the most probably well-known foreign films the last few years, one that caused a lot of ripples, and I think most people know, and that's a Swedish romance slash vampire film, Let the Right One In, from 2008, based on the novel of the same name from 2004. It was written by oh shoot, I just had it. John Ajvide Lindqvist. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, if you were to ask somebody, like, name like 10 Swedish films, this might be the first one they probably couldn't do it, but they could name a few, and this is probably the first that would jump to mind. They're like, oh yeah, that was Swedish. I saw that. I saw a Swedish movie. I think that's how a lot of people felt when they saw this movie. It's like, I saw a Swedish movie, because for most people that's not really a normal thing and stuff. I have to think that it's not like the best Swedish movie, but it might be like the most like kind of widely known in a way, or at least widely.
See, I get a lot mixed up. I've seen a lot of Scandinavian films, and I tend to lump them all in the same group, even though I shouldn't do that. But I do.
And speaking of which, this will also be the third time that we take a Scandinavian-esque film, and then for the following week do an episode on the American remake. We already did it with the Swedish/Norwegian film Insomnia, Danish film Night Watch, and we're going to do the same here. So for once, we can give you a bit of a heads up that next week we will do the American remake of Let the Right One In with its slightly different title, Let Me In. But as we were saying before the show, there's a lot to talk about as far as the differences between the book, the first movie, and the remake, and we're going to try not to talk too much about that in this episode and save it for the next episode, for obvious reasons, for the compare and contrast stuff. But yes, this is a big foreign movie. Every few years, there's some big sort of foreign movie that actually resonates over here. I remember Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in 2000 was one.
Mm-hmm.
All these Chinese movies get completely ignored over here, but for whatever reason, that clicks and it gets international releases and really does well with American audiences. And I think this is another, maybe on a lesser scale, but this movie definitely got people talking. There was a lot of buzz about this movie. I heard a lot about it before I saw it. I didn't see it in 2008. I probably saw it maybe 2 years later, 2 or 3 years, maybe. Mm-hmm. Resisting it or anything. And this was just a time where, I don't know, I was seeing movies. I was aware it was probably a pretty good movie. It was on my radar to see. I just didn't get around to it for whatever reason. And then when I did see it, I liked it very much.
Yeah, I saw it pretty early on when it came out. I mentioned to you the original Blu-ray here in America had different translation. Basically a dumbed down version of the original theatrical translation. And I watched it, that's the first way I saw it. And then I realized that, and I sold that disc and got a disc from, I believe, the UK that has the original theatrical translation. And
so has it been a really long time since you've seen it? Like, was it noticeable? Like you were already seeing differences?
Yeah, there's quite a few differences. Yeah, it changes entire meanings of scenes and what's happening, and it's very different.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
because honestly, I can't tell you what versions I've seen. Like, I just watched one online, and it seemed to line up with how I first saw it, which was a few years ago when it was on a movie channel on TV. That's how I first watched it. So that was, I guess the theatrical.
Probably American, so. I think Magnolia put the disc out. I think it was Magnolia, and they. Once they sold out of that original stock, they released a new disc that has the other translation on it. So it's probably not that easy to find if you wanted to. But
well, can you give an example of a scene that as soon as you saw it, you realized it was different from how you'd seen it before?
I can't really remember, but I know a lot of the stuff involving her backstory, and the conversation that they have right after she bleeds. When she walks in, they talk a good bit about, what she is and all that. A lot of that was really different. I do remember that.
Well, in the version I just watched, they say almost nothing about what she is how I remember. I mean, at one point he does say, "Are you a vampire?" And her answer is, "I need blood to live." I remember that, but I can't remember them ever really having much of a discussion. At one point, he says, "Are you 12?" And she says, "I've been 12 for a very long time."
Yeah, I think that was some of the stuff that was different. It was right around the crotch shot when we got a shot of the crotch, yeah. Which we'll get to, I'm sure.
Yeah, one of the many things that's
But
different in all three versions, at least a little bit, or at least insofar as how it's explained.
but I was floored by this movie. I just remember I watched it probably 2 or 3 times. That original disc I had, and the end scene, when in the pool is it's really really great, really well done. And I watched it this time with headphones, and I could really hear the sound design is really great in this movie too.
Oh, I should have done that.
It's really lots of really you can tell they put a lot of time into making it as good as they could, much as much detail as they could to the sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's a vampire movie, and obviously that's a big that's a big subgenre out there. There's a lot of vampire movies, and it's a very old genre going all the way back to silent film. So there's been a lot of different takes. So it's interesting to think a movie in 2008 could give us something that's actually a little different and
Yes.
isn't necessarily so predictable and has some different quirks and spins to it. I guess it's one of the things that I appreciate. Years ago on the Sausage Factory, in our second season, we did a show on vampires, and I talked about how they are one of my favorite things in fiction. So I have really specific ideas about how they should be and how they shouldn't. And sometimes a certain vampire movies, I don't like at all because to me they don't follow rules. Like they're all made up anyway, but like rules that that whatever are the most appealing for me. Whatever's the most appealing for me, I make the rules and stuff like that. So there's a lot of vampire movies right away that I can just discount because I don't like how they do it. Art, I like it. And in a way, it even just downplays that stuff.
Yeah. Which I think it really works. It's almost like the relationship between shit.
Oscar.
Oscar and Ellie is the that's the focus, and then the vampire stuff comes in a little bit later. Is
sure.
Kind of under the main plot, but
that definitely is the most important thing in the movie. Is this relationship, and the fact that she's a vampire is the hook or whatever, and the big complication. But there's still all sorts of stuff that goes in there that just works on like just a normal relation. Well, you know what I mean by normal, a non-vampire relationship level. Just especially with like kids around that age. And so with Oscar, we've got a kid that's very lonely, dealing with a lot of isolation. He and his mother gets along. His mother's a good parent, but it's just him and her. Mm-hmm. He seems to sort of idealize his father, who doesn't see him that much, but obviously his father's not really a great father. He's not around very much, and it's implied he's got a bit of an alcohol issue and stuff like that. But like a lot of kids, particularly boys, he doesn't want to see his father in a bad light, so he still sort of idealizes him anyway. But so yeah, we've got this lonely kid, and it makes him a bit more sensitive and stuff, and a good target for bullies. And the big part of the movie is how he's targeted and bullied, and how it affects him as a person. For instance, it gives him fairly morbid interests, like the murders that are actually linked to Ely. He was following those closely anyway, just because he was sort of having a morbid interest and stuff like that. He was following it and cutting out the clippings from the newspaper and stuff like that. And I think this is true too. Like when you have a kid who is just a nice kid, doesn't want to hurt anybody or anything like that, and doesn't have any of those like mean instincts in him, but if that person becomes like repeatedly targeted by bullies and abused, it skews them to a certain extent where he doesn't have that mentality anymore, because a lot of what we see is that he actually does have revenge fantasies, and and not even all of it is necessarily revenge against his tormentors. It's more against anybody. When we see him with the knife and stuff, we get the idea that he just relishes the idea of him being the aggressor for once and victimizing someone else. And it really shows how like bullies can create other bullies, because you get the feeling, you know, it's very true to life. Early on, his only thought was probably, I wish they would leave me alone. I wish they would leave me alone. But eventually it turned to, I wish I could get them. I wish I could get back at them. Or I wish I could hurt somebody. I wish I could be the one, you know? And
it's like a power struggle.
and it shows how, like, basically a kid who's a good kid can get some very bad instincts in it. And that's one of the things I like the best about the movie is, like, there's no white and black here. The characters are all gray. There's a lot of gray morality going on, and that most of the characters aren't all good or all bad. They're just sort of a mix, which is very true to life. Of course, with Ellie, you think the hook is, well, here's a sympathetic vampire. She cares for this boy, and that's different because vampires are just usually killers and stuff. But at the same time, yes, but she's not as sympathetic as other sympathetic vampires, in that she's pretty dispassionate about what she does. The people that we see that are victimized in this movie are fine people. None of them are bad people. It's this group of people, and they're just normal, you know, everyday people. And we do see the impact it has on them as they're losing friends and stuff like that. And you feel bad for them and stuff too. So as much as you might like want to follow the main characters, the couple, and root for them and stuff, you still feel a lot of empathy about what's happened to this group of people that she's victimizing. Although again, she's doing it just to live. She doesn't necessarily take pleasure or joy in it, but at the same time, she doesn't seem to be particularly sad about it either.
Yeah, I think it goes through great detail to show the gore and the blood against innocent people, especially the scene in the woods when he's getting the blood. What's the guy's name? Hakan,
yeah.
Hakan. He's getting the blood from someone he's just killed, and they're hanging up in the woods, and the dog kind of interrupts him, and he gets discovered. The body gets discovered. He can't get the blood. That's really it was really disturbing to me. The way he was able to just do that easily. I didn't really feel sorry for him or for Ely.
I probably didn't the first time I watched it, but now that I know all the things that I know, I feel really sorry for him. That he's in a really terrible situation, and as I said, I can't help but be influenced by things outside of the movie, so it's not very fair. But I have read the book, and he is a more sympathetic character in there because he's very. He does show a lot of remorse. He doesn't like that he has to kill at all, and he actually feels guilt to the point that he gives money away to people and stuff like that. Like, it's something that he constantly lives with, is the guilt of doing this to people.
I'm
but in the movie, that's not really in there.
The whole, I know you didn't want to talk about this till next week, but the whole pedophilia angle is basically the whole reason he's with her to begin with, right? Is he's sexually attracted to her as a young girl.
Yeah.
So that right there makes him less sympathetic in my eyes, but because they don't go through that, that angle at all. It's all open ended.
Yeah.
You don't know what he is, where he came from.
Mm-hmm. As I said, you find out more about him in the book, and it's laid down in no uncertain terms that he is a pedophile. But again, I find him sympathetic. I feel sorry for him that he's in this, pretty terrible situation. And you do see a little bit of her early on. He botches it. Like, he's really bad at what he does too. He's like constantly screwing it up, and then he botches it there, and she's screaming at him and yelling at him, and he just keeps telling her that he's sorry and stuff. I mean, that's the thing about one of the things that plays with your perceptions of a movie like this, is that she's the child and he's the guy, and he's the adult, and also he's at least in the movie implied to be a pedophile or something like that. But in no way does he have any power in the relationship. She could kill him anytime. She felt like so, and he actually does have a love for her that isn't as messed up as it sounds once the things are peeled back a little bit more. It's still pretty messed up, but it's not as messed up as it looks on the surface. But But yeah, so getting back to the earlier point, it's just like all these characters have just sort of shades where nobody's completely unsympathetic really, and nobody's completely I don't know, admirable or great either. Everybody has their flaws and stuff like that. I mean, the bullies pretty bad. Although within the group of bullies, there's at least one who is very reluctant and doesn't want to participate, and you see that he's upset by it, and he's the only one that. Spoilers here, I guess. And here's one of the main differences from the three versions of the story is the whole pivotal ending with the pool scene. It gets her actions get worse as we go forward. In the book, she only kills the brothers. She leaves the other bullies alive. In the first film, she kills all the bullies except for the reluctant one. She leaves him. And in the remake, she kills all of them.
So, oh, really? I don't even remember the remake. So
yeah, I don't remember it too well either. I had to read that too, and then when I read it, I looked up. But I haven't seen I've only seen the remake once, so I'm looking forward to watching it again.
Well, I noticed that she killed the the main bully, the main guy that's been bothering him, his brother, and the one responsible for getting him there. You know, the one that called him on the phone and said, "Hey, are you coming tonight?"
Yeah, that's who she kills in the film.
The one that was reluctant was
she leaves him. But in the book, it's only the head bully and his brother. The others are left alive, and in the remake, she kills all of them. But what makes the book a little different is actually there's actually another bully who's worse, and he's just not part of the pool thing, so nothing happens to him. He's one of the most aggressive bullies throughout the book that does stuff to him, but he doesn't take part in the pool thing, so there's no consequences for him. He actually gets to live. I can't remember what his name was.
Oh man, yeah, they really do a good job of making those bullies like completely hated.
Yeah, that's another thing that gets minimalized in the remake. I don't talk about it too much. Is like the secondary characters barely exist in the remake. Like a few of them are eliminated altogether, and then other ones have just barely any screen time. So I don't want to talk too much about it again right now, but it's one of the reasons why I know I like the original more. Is that it gives you more? It gives you more from the secondary characters, and it gives you more angles, and it shows the ripples of how this is affecting everybody.
Yeah. Sorry, I had something I was going to say, and I forgot what it was. But oh shit. Lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
Okay, well, just if people aren't familiar with it, the setup is I think it's 1981. It never really gives you a year, but I think in the book it's 81. It's obviously early 80s in Sweden, in a suburb of Stockholm, when you have this lonely kid living who's being bullied, and then the vampire girl Lily moves into his building next door, and she has this guy who's like her helper. And he kills the people for her and brings the blood back to her, so she doesn't have to, I guess, risk exposing herself and going out and killing herself. And then it's about how they form a friendship and bond that turns into more. All the while, she is still, of course, doing what she needs to do, getting people killed, and some of the people that are in the circle of friends start sort of on their own investigating. One of the killings is even witnessed by one of them and stuff. And at first he doesn't want to come forward, but eventually he realizes he has to, and then he starts investigating his own. So it's about how these forces are all, and plus the situation of the bullies changes, because when she finds out that he's being bullied, he's always been passive. Her advice to him is like, you have to hit back, you have to fight back. And it's about how all these forces converge and lead to various climaxes and stuff like that. So that's our setup. And then, there's even deeper things going on here as we find out more about Ely, who is not, as it turns out, just a vampire, but actually biologically was born a boy who was at some point castrated and has been for an indeterminate amount of time living as a girl and presumably identifies as a girl. So you could make the argument that this is a transsexual vampire, because it seems very much to me that Ely identifies as female, gives every reason of that. Because let's face it, if you or me, if some awful thing happened and we lost our genitalia, that would be bad, but it wouldn't make either of us decide, well, I guess I'll just live my life as a female. Like, we wouldn't do that. But this is what Ely chooses to do, so it seems to suggest that Ely is a transsexual because she has made that choice, and you don't see any reason why she would have to. So, yeah. So I would say, yes, a transsexual vampire.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess you're just play the cards you're dealt in a situation like that. You don't have a lot of choice. You know, you're prepubescent, so I guess you could technically pass for a girl. So
you think it's just more practicality?
It's hard to say.
Because she still seems fairly feminine to me. She seems to talk and act a lot like a girl to me in her mannerisms.
Yeah. You know, I'm not sure.
Because, like I said, if I got my dick chopped off when I was 12, I wouldn't just be like, I'll be a girl.
Well,
I know I would.
I know.
It's not because, you know, like our gender is not just tied to our genitalia. It's not like if you lost it, then you just suddenly flip genders. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, I've heard
would you
stories.
Would you make that choice if something happened to you and you lost your genitalia? Would you just be like, well, I might as well be a girl?
I don't think I'd be able to pull it off very well, but you know, I've heard stories of you know, psychological studies of children that have had botched circumcisions. You know, boys that have had botched circumcisions, and they, you know, lose their dick, and so they just decide to do away with all of it and raise them like a girl. It generally doesn't turn out very well.
I was gonna say no. See, that doesn't sound right. Yeah. See, it just seems to prove that gender is just not that not that simple of a thing. It's more complex. But anyway, not to get into a whole thing about it. But yeah, I always think of Ely as female because it seems to me that's how she identifies. Like, and I don't see any reason why she would have to. Nobody's forcing her. Nothing's. I can't see any advantage of being a girl or a boy. She's still stuck as a 12-year-old, whatever she does, stuck as a 12-year-old vampire. And the only like advantage of being a 12-year-old is that she can get this pedophile to do her bidding for her because of attraction for her.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they don't really discuss it, other than her telling Oscar that, you know, would you still like me if I wasn't a girl?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, what are you talking about? You're a girl though, so whatever. But you know, you don't know, is she talking about would you still like me if I'm a vampire, you know, versus would you still like me if I'm not a human being?
Yeah, like as I was saying, I never felt like it was necessary. Like, it seemed to me it was enough that she was a vampire to not have that added thing. But I mean, fine, I guess if that's what the author... to me, it feels like ramming in as many, you know, sort of heavy subjects as he can, and this is just one more. It doesn't ruin the movie for me, but honestly, it doesn't seem necessary. I would have been fine if Ellie was simply a girl, you know, biologically and everything like that. Would have been fine. I don't think anyone would have changed things too much, you know. She still could say the same thing because she's right. She's not a girl in that, one, she's like 100 years old, and two, she's not a girl in that she's not human. So,
right.
Those exact lines could still work.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I do kind of like that it does give another level to the film, you know, of exactly what's going on. But, you know, it's just all in the open, so you're just, you know, left to interpret that however you want, because it doesn't go, you know, it doesn't specifically say that she was castrated, you know, that she was a castrated boy. It just shows the scar, and I guess you interpret that how you want to.
But all that is specifically said in the novel it's based on.
Right.
Afterwards. But yeah, and I mean, so maybe that's a bit of a compromise as far as the movie goes. They're like, well, we don't want to get into all that, but we can at least show it, and then people can, you know, draw their own conclusions, which is, I guess, is fine.
Yeah.
Either in the movie or the book, but it is what it is, and that's fine. It doesn't turn me off necessarily. I just feel like it's making things. It's already busy. It's making things overly busy, I guess, is how I feel. Especially considering, as you said, like, as far as the dynamic between him, his feelings for her. See, they make it more... On one hand, I was praising the movie for taking out the background and just showing the scar and letting you draw your own conclusions. But at the same time, it makes a bit of a mess of things as far as his feelings for her. Because, again, in the book, it's understood, and it's one of the things that makes the character interesting is when he finds out the whole truth, that she's a vampire and that she's actually biologically a boy. The whole point is his struggle is more with the boy thing than the vampire thing. In the book, where he has more problems with that because he's thinking, am I gay? Is there something wrong with me? He's struggling with that more than I'm in love with a vampire. And that's just, not shown in the movie whatsoever. So I don't know. I feel like the movie kind of trips itself up there.
You're a vampire?
And
okay, cool. You're still a chick, though, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
But I mean, I get why the movie made such an impact on people. It just has a very different sort of feel to it, and it's one of those few movies that can be one moment sort of heartwarming and another moment horrifying. I mean, that's hard to pull off, and it does a really great job of it. And it doesn't show. It shows stuff, but it doesn't show too much. In the American remake, I remember, as American remakes go, they just go full on and they show blood all over. I think one of the best scenes is when Laka comes and puts it all together and comes and tries to kill her while she's sleeping in the tub, and Oscar interrupts him so that she wakes up and is able to defend herself. When she fights Laka, that, like, we don't see it. The door starts to close,
and I think that's great.
Yeah. Like the door is mostly closed over, and we just sort of see some blood spatter and hear the noises. And I think that's much better done than just seeing her like rip somebody apart. Really.
That's what people don't realize, man. And then these days of CGI, they want to show every single aspect of it, and it's like, I mean, think about the most powerful stuff like Jaws. Like that's all off-screen stuff, and it's so powerful.
Just like you said, how well it's done with the whole pool thing in the climax there, where the camera stays on Oscar underwater.
Yeah.
It stays on him. She comes in and starts fighting them and ripping them apart, but we don't see that. The camera doesn't move from Oscar, so we only see what's around him. So yeah, we see that he doesn't see one of them getting dragged, and then eventually we see a head and we see an arm, but we don't see how it happens. We just see the result, which is really effective and great.
Yeah. Oh, it's so well done. You see the one kid being dragged backwards in the pool. You just see his feet in the water. Oh man, I love it. Oh, so great. And then the hand that's holding him down under the water just kind of
suddenly becomes this disembodied arm. It's really great.
Oh man.
Although it's the one time in the movie where I feel like they are playing fast and loose with the rules they've established. Because I totally buy, as I've seen in almost any sort of vampire fiction or read, is that vampires have enhanced strength. They're much stronger than human beings. Sometimes they're monstrously strong. Sometimes they're just stronger. In this, so it's like, okay, sure. But early in the movie, there's nothing that suggests that. Because Hawkins doing the killing for her. And then when she goes and kills people, she doesn't really do it through any great strength. When she jumps on Virginia, she just jumps on people and bites their necks is all she does. She's not manhandling them or ripping them apart. And when she jumps on Virginia, when Laka comes up, he easily kicks her off. It takes no effort in his part. He kicks her off like she's a fucking rag doll. So it was a little confusing in the end for me the first time I saw the movie, because I was just like, okay, she is a super strong vampire, because she always seemed very frail.
Maybe it's because she was always hungry. Maybe if she's hungry, she's not as powerful. Or
yeah, I know. You can go back and forth on that all you want, I guess, with vampire rules and stuff. Yeah, you could be like, oh, she's more depleted, so she doesn't have her strength. So you can say she just fed right before she, had the pool confrontation. Sure, she's at the height of her power. Sure, that's fine. So I'm not gonna criticize it too much for that. But I just remember feeling a little confused by that, because the first time I saw the movie, I felt like the rules they'd established was like, as vampires go, she was kind of a weakling. And then suddenly she just rips these people, like literally rips limbs off them, which of course would take a strength that no human has. A person can't do that.
She was flying around that pool too, like flying around the pool area.
I mean, that's cool too. That, like, again, we know she can fly, but we never actually see it. I like that. Like, just suddenly she's up in a window and stuff like that. And I like that when she first comes in to see that first time when she comes in to see Oscar and she has the window. He's like, "How did you get here?" And she's like, "Flew." And he's like, "Okay." And it has the whole thing about, well, I guess where "let the right one in" comes from, where it follows the rule that a vampire can't come into a room or building unless it's invited. So she's asking him to invite her, and she's tapping on the glass, which is just like in
Salem's Lot.
Salem's Lot, yeah, which always was thought was the scarier parts of the book.
That's the best part.
the kids would come and tap on the glass and be like, "Let me in," you know, which I guess is what maybe why they changed the title of the remake to "Let Me In." I don't know. I don't really know why they did that. It's not bad. It's not a bad change. It's also not necessary.
It's.
I keep talking. I'm working on a sneeze. I keep expecting to sneeze, and it's not happening. So I'm sorry if I just sneeze in the middle of something here.
I don't know. I like Let the Right One In. It seems like let the right. I mean, you can interpret it a few different ways, so that's what I like about it.
Yeah. No, I like it too because it's like the whole rule about vampires is don't let them in.
Mm.
But in Oscar's case, it was right. It is good for him to let her into his life and stuff. Like it has a positive effect. Although by the end of the movie, has it had a positive effect? He's now a fugitive on the run, so he's not going to see his parents anytime soon. So really, all they have is each other. He seems happy about this, but again, it's sort of open-ended. How happy is he going to be? Especially when you're a young kid like that, where it seems like a romantic adventure, and then the reality sort of sets in. Oh, I'm not going to see my parents, and
it's kind of like there's no turning back after what happened in that pool.
Right. Well, so absolutely. There's no turning back. I'm just saying that they seem awfully pleased about it.
Because I mean, look at it. Look at the shit he caught just for hitting that kid in the ear.
Right.
Who knows?
Plus, it also proves sort of again, like we're like, oh, she's a nice vampire. Well, not really. She's still super bloodthirsty because she didn't have to do what she did to them. She could have just stopped them, but she didn't. She brutally slays them. So she knows that she's. It is a point of no return for him, that his life will have to change at this point. And she just goes ahead and does it. So
I wanted to talk to you about something that really occurred to me when I watched it this time. It almost seems like she's grooming him to be the next helper the entire time. Maybe she doesn't have.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it, because yes, that's absolutely a huge.
I mean, is that what you? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. That's what I think. I'm not as nearly sentimental as I was the first time I saw the movie, and I don't really buy into the cute love story that much anymore. It seems like, that he's just going to be her new
I mean, she knows that he's gotten too old.
He'll get older and she won't. He'll get older and she won't, and he'll still need that and stuff like that. And so it just seems like she very effectively, she knew like especially when you look at it from the perspective of where we're at when the movie starts. Hawkins getting older. He's getting sloppy. Yep. He's botching jobs. He's becoming annoying in his needs. Because at one point when he says, like, if I'm going to do this for you, then you're finally going to let me touch you and stuff like that. And she actually agrees. But, and we were discussing before, just to let people know, the main plot difference between this and the original book is that there's a whole thing where after Hawkins is arrested and detained in the hospital because of what he did to his face with the acid. By the way, I wouldn't do that. Now, let's say you're facing a prison term, or you can pour acid all over your face. What are you going to do? I think I'll go to prison, thanks. But anyway, so both those things happen in the movie and the book. But what changes is when she goes to visit him in the hospital in the movie, he offers himself up. It's the end of the road for him, so he offers himself up to her. So she feeds on him and then flings him out the window, and he dies, and that's the end of him. Whereas in the book, that's the plan, but a security guard comes in and interrupts them, and even so, she doesn't finish feeding. And even though he falls out the window, he doesn't die. Instead, he turns. But this is where it really diverges from other vampire stuff, because it brings up all sorts of questions about like how the rules of turning work, because he does not exactly turn into a fully functional vampire. He turns into what is more like just a brain-dead zombie, and then you have this whole thing where, as like this brain-dead zombie, all he can, like, he doesn't talk anymore, he doesn't really think. All he can think about is that he wants to get her, and he has this scene where he tries to trap her in a basement because he wants to rape her, and she fights him off and escapes. And later he gets killed by like a completely unimportant character who just sort of accidentally kills him, which is pretty stupid. But anyway, so that's the main difference, because in the movie he simply falls off and dies. But in the book, there's this whole thing where he turns, but he's not like a vampire at all, really. He's just more like a mindless ghoul zombie type thing, or thoughts or anything. He just single-mindedly is coming after her, kind of like a wild beast.
Mm-hmm. It seems like
I can understand why they eliminated it. It's not really that important.
It seems like it would be a much different movie or a much different story with that happening.
Book gives you just so much more of his character. Even before that, we get to know his background, how he was a teacher, and probably put in jail for a while because he was found in possession of child pornography. This caused him to just sort of be an outcast and vagrant, and then eventually hooks up with her. And it's funny too because it's also implied that as a pedophile, he's actually more attracted to boys than girls, and then find out that Ellie biologically is a boy, even though she doesn't have genitalia. But anyway, he is in love with her and attracted to him, whatever. And so their arrangement goes.
And that's primarily why he does what he does, because he is so sexually attracted to her, right? He's infatuated with her.
Yeah, it's basically an infatuation thing, because like he knows he can't force himself, and yet he just hopes that maybe sometime she'll be kind and reciprocate, and she never is. It's just he has to keep doing what she wants, even though he really doesn't like killing and he feels bad about it and stuff. As I said, he's more sympathetic in the book, even though more is revealed about him in the book, because you could even watch the movie and not necessarily make the pedophile connection, I guess, maybe, and stuff. Although at the same time, not to wave a flag for them or anything like that, but it is true that, like, pedophiles don't choose to be pedophiles. The ones that act on it, they're making a choice, and that's wrong. But the ones that don't, they just are what they are, and But anyway,
we're actually sponsored by NAMBLA.
The love between a man and boy is pure in ancient Greece. Blah 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 blah. Let's not go down that road. Exactly. But as I said, to me, yeah, so I mean, I get it. People have different reactions to it. But for me, this character, him, is more of a pathetic character. Or, me, he's sort of a sad, wretched, pathetic thing stuck in a very bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
Feel remorse and guilt and stuff. And I don't think, and one of the things I do like about her is I don't think she's capable of feeling remorse and guilt. Not because she's a bad person, but because she's a vampire. And that's when I get mad at the movies that have the sympathetic vampires. I don't like vampires that are kind and cutesy and nice and have consciences. To me, once you become a vampire, that's all gone. For her. Weird. And as you said, the more cynical view is, yeah, she kind of likes Oscar, but maybe more as like a pet. That's how she likes him. And again, in the book, when they meet, she's actually considering killing him. And then he just says something nice to her and she changes her mind.
That would change everything, wouldn't it?
So that would really change everything. So for the sake of the movie, they want to play it up and make it more of a romance. And that's fine, because it is very heartfelt and nice. And I don't want to be completely cynical. And you get the feeling that he's going to be happy with her for a few years, despite the fact that it's a pretty fucked up life they have to live, and now he can't be with his parents anymore and stuff like that. I mean, I'm still susceptible to a certain amount of sentiment when it comes to romances and stuff like that. Sure. And they do have some fairly heartwarming, cute moments together, and I think it's well done.
Well, the first kiss when she kills the guy that when she's in the bathtub. She kills the guy, and then she comes out, and that's when she kisses Oscar.
With blood on her mouth.
With blood on her mouth, yeah. And I don't know. Maybe she does love him, but watching lots of vampire movies in the past has me jaded to think that she's just using him to do what she needs,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And see, I can take that view too. But for a certain fandom of this movie, that just destroys the movie, because for them it's all about the cutesy love story. And I don't even mean, I shouldn't even say cutesy, because that's not fair. Because in very, very rare cases, I think most of the time it's fluff. Because I mean, hell, let's face it, even as an adult, people have like romances with each other that just turn out to be all bullshit. But even more so, kid, you talk about puppy love. You're just a kid. Your emotions aren't fully developed. You think you're in love with this person, but it's really just all, superficial stuff and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But I do think in very rare occurrences, very young kids, maybe even as young as 12, could actually have a genuine, real love. It's a very rare thing, but I do believe it can happen. And maybe that's what they're saying for this movie. That's fine. It does show up in movies now and again. And I'm not saying it's a completely unbelievable thing. It's a rare thing, but I think it can happen. I think that kids very young can fall in love and actually have a genuine, lasting love. It's never happened for me, but it can happen.
This came out the same year as Twilight, which obviously really plays up the romantic
Mm-hmm.
aspects with vampires. So I'm guessing that's one of the big reasons that the remake came out, to capitalize on some of that audience.
I think so, absolutely.
So that's, they're definitely going to play up the romance
Yeah,
instead of the gore.
sure. But yeah, I mean, not to harp on it too much, because even 10 years ago we were harping on, exactly what Twilight did to vampire fiction. But I mean, it's very true that just everything that was cool and dangerous and sinister about vampires was just completely wiped out. Series, books, and movies, because it wasn't just like, oh well, it's love. Because not only do you find out that, okay, the girl falls in love with the boy who turns out to be a vampire. Okay, we've seen this before. Human vampire. There's something good in him, so he can love her. Turns out he's just a good guy anyway. He doesn't even kill people, and he comes from a whole family of nice vampires. Oh, they're vampires, but they don't kill people. They don't kill people at all, and they don't hate people. They don't think of people as food or cattle. They're not, they're not like the way vampires are in most fiction, where they look down on humans as just, food and not worthy of anything. And no, they're just a bunch of nice vampires. Like, oh, now you have a nice human girlfriend. Well, that's complicated, but so everything is sucked out of these vampires. Not, and of course the fact that they sparkle in the daylight, but I just mean everything is sucked out of those vampires. So I can forgive vampire fiction that has that big cliche of whether it's a guy or a girl or whatever, where a human and a vampire fall in love. That's fine. That happens a lot. And, there's some good in this vampire. They love this person. But I mean, in Twilight, it's just the whole thing. It's not just like that, because it's not like, oh, but she comes from a family of vicious killers. Well, no, he doesn't. He comes from a family of, what would you call them? They'd be like the, what's the word? Vegan equivalent of vampires or something like that, right? I don't know.
It's like in True Blood, they had this drink that was like synthetic blood that they could drink.
Yeah. For the nice vampires. That way you could like the vampire, because they're not killing anybody.
Yeah.
And stuff. See, what's good about this movie is it doesn't mess around with any of that bullshit. She's a vampire. She has to have blood to survive. Therefore, she has to kill people. Maybe she doesn't throw with the situation, but she doesn't feel bad about it either. She's not sorry. She's more sorry about the complications it brings in. She's like, I'm a vampire. It is what it is. And you understand it. She's been a vampire for decades and decades, and it is what it is, type thing. Because at one point, like, Oscar seems to try to make her feel guilty, and she refuses to. And she tries to do some equating, saying, well, you wish you could kill people, the people that hurt you, which is pretty and he says yes. I think that's a pretty unfair thing to say. I'd be like, I'm an emotionally stunted 12-year-old who's being bullied every day by a bunch of sadistic bullies, and you're trying to tell me that I'm as bad as them or something. I would get a bunch of moral outrage at that point, but he just says yes, because he's not mature enough, and he's just happy to whatever it takes to go along with her. Mm-hmm. She's going to be with him, so that's good enough. And again, I can understand that. I can understand being that young and you're just thrilled. Just like when he's saying, like, about how he wants, like, do you want to go steady, be boyfriend, girlfriend? And she's saying how, well, they can't do any of that. But then when she throws the labels out the window, she's like, but we can just be together. And that makes him happy. It's like, okay, we don't have to put a label on it, honey. We're together. Great, And I understand that. You can be much older and think that, obviously. But so it's certainly understandable for, like, a boy of that age. One thing that's nice is both actors are actually played by. They were actually 11 when they filmed, so they were living. So it's not like much older actors playing younger. So that's nice too, and both do a great job. Mm-hmm. I think, especially the female lead, who I think is just maybe the main difference between this for me and the American remake is that she's just way better than Chloe Grace Moretz, or however you say her name, who I've never thought was a bad actress, but this actress, she just has this great sort of air of darkness about her.
Well, she doesn't
drip darkness, which is great.
Yeah, she doesn't look like she's a movie star, like Chloe Grace Moretz looks like someone you picked out of a 17 magazine or some shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's got that pretty face.
Compared to the book, they do pretty them up a little bit. In the book, Oscar's overweight, which is one of the reasons he gets bullied. They throw that out the window for that. He's a fairly, pleasing to look at kid. He's a bit wimpy, but he's a good looking kid. And also in the book, they really play up how sort of like mangy looking she is. You get a bit of that in the movie, but in the book, it's supposedly even worse. I mean, there's a great part where like when he meets and he tells her she smells weird.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was trying to see, is that another part of the vampire lore, or is that just that she hasn't
Bad
bathed
hygiene,
in a long time?
yeah. I mean,
I didn't know if
it could be either or. They never really say. So you could be like,
was,
vampires just naturally have an unpleasant smell, or just the fact that she just lives a fairly unhygienic life.
Or maybe it's because she was so hungry, because the entire time that they were having that first conversation, you could hear her stomach in the background, gurgling.
Yeah,
which was
I don't think I picked up on that the first time I saw the movie either.
Yeah, I didn't either.
If
but I
I watched it with headphones like you had it, it would have been
Yeah, it was cool. I always pick stuff up when I watch films with headphones on than I would otherwise, unless you're just like blasting it, as loud as possible. There's a lot of stuff you don't hear. But yeah, I like that aspect of the vampire lore, if that was what that is. That certain smell that they give off.
Yeah. But I mean, that is some of the stuff that's older that has sort of gotten lost lately. But if you go back to like some of the original vampire lore from, say, the 19th century, there's a whole bunch of stuff about them being sort of more feral and stuff.
Right.
See, the thing that really churned everything was Dracula, and it wasn't the book Dracula. It was the Bela Lugosi Dracula. That was really the thing that changed the whole thing from like sort of a feral, dirty, animalistic thing to just sort of a suave, good-looking person that actually radiates sexuality.
The romantic aspect.
Exactly. Which I think, and I like both. I like both. Yeah. I think both have merit. So that's not one of the rules where I split it down the middle. I enjoy both.
I was going to say the same thing. I like both.
Because I will admit that for most of the vampire fiction that I like, and even some of the stuff I've written, I do have to take in the whole attraction or sexuality. To me, that is something that's in a vampire's arsenal. That they can repulse somebody at the same time as attract them. That they have that weird ability where, they give off a vibe where like something about them upsets you, but something about them also attracts you. Like, I like that. I think that's cool. So I do like seeing that in vampire fiction for sure.
There was a couple of scenes in this movie where she was played by a different actress who was actually older, a good bit older than her, for when she, when he cut his hand and had the blood, when like it was a locker room at school.
Mm-hmm. I did notice that, and I just thought I was wrong because I'm bad with faces and stuff. I thought I was wrong,
and it was meant to make her look more menacing.
I had to read that. I read that like just before we went on air,
and
stuff like that.
Yeah, I didn't notice that it wasn't her either. They did a great job with that casting. But her voice changed.
Well, I mean, I did notice, but I didn't trust myself.
Well, I didn't know it was a different actress.
I did think, is that a different actress? And then I immediately discounted and thought, no, you're just bad with faces and stuff. No, I did think that, but I didn't believe. I figured I was wrong. But yeah, then I found that out only just like a few weeks ago.
But
I also love how the cats react.
Oh man, the cats. That's one complaint I have with this movie. One of the very few complaints I have is those cats look so stupid. The CGI cats.
Oh yeah, the CGI is not good, but I like the cat's reaction.
Sure.
A big part of like not just vampire, but like any sort of like supernatural fiction usually suggests that cats have a certain sensitivity to like magic and otherworldliness and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it makes perfect sense to me that the cats immediately identify her as unnatural and an enemy. I like that very much.
Yeah, she just walks in and like 50 cats jump on top of her. It's pretty funny. It's like, man, you guys have a lot of cats.
Yeah, poor Virginia.
And did she want to be killed? Like she said, open the blinds, so she knew.
Yeah, she put it together, and she just wanted to die. She even says, even before she doesn't say what she is, but she actually says to Locke when he visits her, "I don't want to live," because he's trying to say nice. He's trying to say, when we get out of the hospital, we'll do this and we'll do that and get the house. And she's like, no, that girl, something infected me or something. She said, I don't want to live. And like, he's like, what? Yeah. So she doesn't want to tell him, I think I turned into a goddamn vampire, because he'll think he's crazy, but she knows. And yeah, that follows the exact same thing in the book. And the book is exactly the same. Willingly destroys herself. This was a movie too where, like, until that point, even though it's true that we only saw her in night scenes, I wasn't entirely sure what they were going to say about the sun. If it was really something that could kill them, or if it was something that just weakened them, because that's something that's in both too. Like, actually in Dracula himself could walk around in the daylight. And yet, I know I've mentioned it before, but either another vampire show, which would have been years ago anyway, so I don't think it's too much repeating, but maybe in other places too, was the big split of the two different ways of doing vampires. Both came from Dracula, whereas Dracula, when it was, adapted into the silent film Nosferatu, the whole thing was they had to change names and stuff like that for issues of legality. Bram Stoker's widow was still around, and she wasn't going to give them rights and stuff. And that's why they made the changes that they did. They changed the name and Count Orlok and stuff. But then they also, of course, made the artistic changes of making him much more feral and rat-like and stuff like that. And what's funny is when those two movies split off from each other, as we said, the Bela Lugosi one is the one that dominates. It's the one everybody thinks about. It's the one where everybody follows those rules, and the other and the the Nosferatu stuff is mostly forgotten, unless it's like you're hardcore in vampires, like somebody like me. But the one thing that is from that and not Dracula is the sunlight thing, and that is the one that endured. That's where it comes from. It comes from the end of Nosferatu. That's how he dies. The sunlight. There's no mention of that in the graphic novel, in the original Dracula novel, or in any other vampire fiction prior, at least that's really prominent. But that is the tipping point. Like, almost everything about Nosferatu has been disregarded, forgotten, and is mostly unknown to a lot of people. But the sunlight thing is the one enduring thing, and that's the route they take in this, where yes, they will literally burst into flames in sunlight.
Yeah, that's, with the exception of Twilight, that's probably one of the more consistent vampire rules or lore, whatever you want to call it.
See, for all the things I hate Twilight for, I don't hate it for that. Like, I don't get mad at it for, like, saying, oh, they should burst into flame, because there's plenty of fiction out there where, no, it's just, they just aren't at the height of their powers, and they're just more like ordinary people in the daylight. Like, I accept that fully. I don't have any problem with vampire fiction that chooses to do it that way. But again, that's another one where I like both. If you're going to do a vampire fiction where they can't go in the sun at all, they'll die, I accept that too. I'm fine with that. And yeah, when I was watching this movie the first time, I was curious how they were going to go. They went with the no sun at all type thing, which does make the ending kind of cute when they're traveling on the train together. It's in the daytime, so she's like in a big trunk, and he taps. Well, what did he tap back to her in the?
It's Small Kiss version, or something like that.
Yeah, but what's funny is but you have to look it up, because at least the version I watched. Because the version I watched, he taps back the Swedish word, which means small kiss. But if you're just watching it, it says puss, and you're like, what? It means small kiss, but it doesn't show that in the subtitles I watched. It just says puss. Oh,
the version that I saw didn't even say what the Morse code was.
Oh, really?
It just had them tapping, so.
Oh, no, the version I watched, she taps, caption, kiss. He taps, caption, puss. So it doesn't hold
what he's thinking about.
Except there is none.
Right.
And that's the other thing about the purity of their love, is that I guess they're just going to have to be a sexless couple. I mean, at the point, you're like, fine, they're 12. But, I mean, down the road.
Not necessarily.
No genitalia is no genitalia.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I realize that there's certain options there. I'm just saying. Anyway, that seemed to be the author's intent. It was supposed to be like to be part of the purity of being that age, to reflect that it's like, oh well, that doesn't come into it yet. Although again, so all this means is eventually he's going to grow into something similar to Oscar. Hell, it might even create a pedophile, right?
Right.
Like he'd be like a normal boy who does, who under other circumstances would have grown up to, as he got older, be attracted to people his own age, blah blah blah. But now he's in this situation where the person he's in love with is never going to age. So you could see like it'll turn him into a pedophile maybe because the love of his life, what he's attracted to the most, is this, for all intents and purposes, image of a 12-year-old girl. So you can say that's a very sort of dark, disturbing turn that the ending can take on too. It's like he's just going to wind up just as fucked up as for Alak or whatever his name is.
Yeah, would that turn someone into a pedophile? I just feel like.
Well, no, this is where it gets really, speculative. Can somebody be turned into a pedophile? I don't know. Like, supposedly not. But I'm just saying this is such a weird situation that it seems like maybe it could. Because I believe pedophilia is kind of the same thing as your sexuality. It's just. You don't learn it or choose it. It's just in you for whatever reason, but it just seems to me like his situation is such that maybe it could create one because again, all his thoughts of love and attraction are tied up in this one image and he's going to get older and it's going to be inappropriate. And, so this is where the people watching are tuning. The movie ends and it's over, but I don't know. I can't help but think about what their future holds.
I've actually got the president of NAMBLA on the phone, and I'm going to see what he feels about turning someone into a pedophile.
He wants to thank me for all my pro comments. He's so pleased with my support. Like, oh god, it's so hard playing devil's advocate sometimes.
No, I mean I totally get what you're saying. I just don't know. I don't know. It's almost like you have a romantic relationship with someone that you're sexually not compatible with. It's almost just like a really strong friendship.
Well, as I said, Word of God from the author himself, like promotes this that is the kind of relationship they have and will continue to have going forward.
Non-sexual,
like a non-physical love. Yeah. Beyond maybe like hugging each other, I guess, or the odd kiss here and there.
Yeah, that sucks for him.
But yeah, I mean that sucks for him. And that's what I mean. That's why, like, more and more, I'm prone to believe in the more cynical sort of thing. That like it's more like she's using him and is just going to turn him into her next like depraved, pathetic helper to murder people for her. As much as I want to like view the movie on its terms, the positive side, like the romantic, it's a unconventional love story, but they're gonna make it. The more I can't help it, like the more I think about it, and the more recently I've seen it, it makes me think the more cynical, not so happy ending, which is maybe she's kind of fond of him, but she doesn't really love him, and she'll be content to use him and turn him into her next pathetic helper.
Yeah, it's really just left out there. You don't know the answer, which is a good thing. But
yeah,
was it all just an act, or does she legitimately have feelings for him? Which, I mean, going from the book perspective, where he's like 45 when she even finds Hawken, right? So, so he's already like well into the middle age of his life. So.
Yeah. No, I'm not trying to say that she turned Hawken into a pedophile. Like he was probably already an established pedophile, whatever. And then he happened upon her, and they had their weird relationship.
I'm just saying they're like the same age, so it's much more believable that they could have a romantic, maybe not necessarily physically romantic, but a romantic relationship.
Yeah.
As opposed to what she had with Hawken.
Right. Exactly. But in a way, it's a little more tragic because he's going to grow up and she's not going to change, and he'll, I guess, remain in love with her, and that will be a very confusing, messed up situation.
They've done that in vampire movies plenty of times.
Oh, sure.
Where they're.
Well, the one thing that's weird is like that. When we talk about how that's been done in vampire movies and the romance. One thing that is never even brought up in this movie is she never even, and neither of them brings up the idea that she could turn him and they could be vampires together. Like, clearly that's an option, but it's never brought up, and it just seems, by the time the movie's over, it's understood that it's not something they're considering at all. That it's like, no, we will keep this, he will stay a human, she will.
If that was me in that position, that would be the first thing that I would think of, so we can both stay the same age and be together forever like that.
Yeah. Plus, if he does become a vampire, you get the idea that he probably would be less repulsed and upset about the killing, because suddenly it would become part of who he is too. So yeah, if it was me, I would think I'm truly in love with her, whatever, that is the way to go. But it's never brought up.
Yeah. And obviously they wouldn't be able to travel in the daytime, like what's happening at the end of the movie. But
yeah, maybe that's the other thing too. Like, she just, again, for the pragmatic reasons, she realizes in order for this work, she needs like a bona fide human.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that can travel in the daytime, somebody that doesn't have the weaknesses a vampire has, and doesn't rely on this. Somebody that can just be a normal human, which once again seems to suck anything out of the
right.
Vampire sex out of the romance theory. That it's true love and romance. It's like, once again, it just seems like careful pragmatism on her part, emotional manipulation, and all this, and you feel kind of sorry for Oscar, what he's in for. It's like, have fun with this life, Oscar.
There's so many points that just seem to point to him just being used,
and
that, like, she doesn't want to turn him into a vampire. She needs someone that can travel during the day. She knows that he has that ability to kill inside of him, and the desire to kill, which is, I guess, something that you would need in someone that's going to go out and get your food for you. The bloodlust, the capability of being able to kill another person. Because that's when she first saw him. He was like stabbing the tree, saying like "Die piggy" or something like that, "Squeal pig."
Yeah.
So maybe from the very beginning, she was intending on turning him into her new helper, her new Renfield.
Yeah, exactly, right. She can see the potential in him. As she says, like, when he's talking about how, like, he doesn't kill people, she's saying, but you want to. And then it even seems like she wishes he would just kill the bullies himself, but since he can't, she comes in and does it. She said something like, "Be me" for a while, what she says.
Yeah, I didn't get that. What's going on with that?
I guess she just means be more aggressive, stand up for yourself. I don't know. It's hard.
She said "be me," and then it showed a picture of her, looked like she had an old lady's face.
Oh, I don't remember.
Did you see that?
I don't remember the face change.
Right after, it was kind of just, it was like darkness, and then all of a sudden you saw her face was really wrinkled and haggard, kind of.
No, I guess I didn't notice about the face.
Yeah, I didn't notice it before this watch either, but I didn't know if maybe she was putting some of her memories in his mind or what. I didn't know what was going on there.
Wow, and I never thought of that.
I mean, what does "be me" mean? I mean, besides put yourself in my shoes, think about it the way
I just thought she meant to, like, be more assertive and aggressive and fight back. I don't know.
Imagine you're a monster who kills people for blood. That should be easy enough.
But as prevalent as bullying is in the world, and there's plenty of it, this is once again one of those Stephen King examples where the story only works if the bullies are like the absolute worst kind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny too, because we see there are different levels of bullies. The leader is worse than the others, and there's one that doesn't even care. But then we also get to the point where the leader isn't even as bad as his brother, but we bring the brother in, who is like a full-on psychopath, and that's what really gets us to where we're going. Because there's a part even where even the younger brother, the leader of the bullies, is concerned, where he's holding him underwater. It's like, okay, we're gonna stop now, right? Where the older brother's like, no, we're gonna keep doing this. And movies, like, in order for that to work, you need like a very specific kind of bully, which I think is rare. Bullies aren't rare in the world, but the ones that go that far, most thankfully, are. But they always pop up in movies because they bring out the best and worst for these sorts of situations. And they're in like every Stephen King novel. There's never just the typical bullies that are just like, "Hey, faggot," and smash his head. They're always like, ones that are like gonna, like, I don't know, just torture you and do the most awful things imaginable.
They're calling you faggot while they put like shards of glass up your asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the best, man. It makes you wonder, like, what did he endure as a kid? because I mean he had to have been bullied like a lot, right? To have it in like virtually everything he's ever done. You know,
I guess.
hardcore bullying.
I guess so. I don't know. I think sometimes people put too much into that. The whole point of being a writer is that you can just make up bullshit.
Sure.
Like, so many people seem to think that, like, you need to experience this or see that. You don't. Sometimes it helps, sure. But the main power of being a writer is you can write about stuff that never happened to you, never will happen to you, didn't happen to anybody you've ever met. That's the point. You're a writer. You can do it. And so sometimes I think people read too much into some of that Stephen King stuff and think, wow, this must have happened in his childhood or this. But, like, maybe. But come on. He's a writer. It's his job. He can write.
I just look at how much of himself he puts in his work because, like,
yeah, he does. You're right. Like 90% of his main characters are writers.
Right, exactly. And it's all set in Maine, and
so many of them are alcoholics.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, in the pantheon of writers, he's definitely way up there for putting himself into his work and doing author avatars. That's true. But still, I don't know. I don't know about the bullying. I mean, I've never heard him speak in specifics about being bullied.
Yeah.
I mean,
but there's a lot of stuff he hasn't talked about. He's just
I guess that's true.
Yeah. But
which I respect.
Know,
I mean,
stuff
if I was a super famous writer, like, I really wouldn't want to explain everything. You know, what's the point?
Sure.
Don't make me explain everything.
Well,
I'm a writer. I wrote it. Okay.
Yeah. It would somehow tarnish the work a little bit, I think, if you actually didn't know what happened. Yeah.
Just like, you know, I mean, I don't even think about it because I'm just to me, what I think is ordinary. I'm an ordinary, open-minded person that just reads all sorts of stuff. But I mean, I have to accept the fact that there's tons of people out there that would never touch a Stephen King book with a 10-foot pole because they take what he writes so seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're just like, you know, if there's ever something like a dog gets killed or the thing in It, or they're like, oh, like, they don't care that It is about, you know, children being murdered. They found out there's a scene where the kids have sex, and they think Stephen King must be some sort of sicko, fucked up, you know. Like, I don't understand people like that. He's a writer, and he wrote some stuff in a book, in a fictional story. You don't have to really be into things to write about them at all. So,
well, in the whole grand scheme, it's really insignificant too. And, you know, in It,
I mean, and by into, I mean, there's different interpretations of into. I mean, I get it. Yeah, you'll write about things that you like or are interested in to a certain extent, sure. But when you're making a point of it being bad, I mean, that doesn't mean you're into it. Like, the whole point you write about people getting murdered in books is usually to say how it's a bad thing or a scary thing or it's conflict in the plot. They're not fantasies written by the authors like saying, God, I wish I could kill people, but I can't. So I'll write books about people getting killed. Like, I don't think so.
I don't think it's as bad as it used to be about that. Like 20 years ago, you know, if you liked horror movies, it meant you wanted to kill people. Or if you made horror movies, it meant you were a bad person.
Maybe I'm just thinking about it because, like, It came out as a movie recently. And, like, the whole thing about the child gangbang thing has just, like, popped into everybody's heads. It's like people that never read a book in their life. Suddenly It is a movie, and they heard this happened, and it's all, and they can't shut up about it. It's like, yeah.
Well, I'll be honest, I was curious just how it played into the plot, but it's really, I mean,
it does play into the plot. I'm not saying, it's absolutely necessary, because it's not. But I'm just saying I also get how it plays into the plot. If you take it out of the movie, which they did, it's fine too. It's not like, oh God, the movie sucks without it. No. Movie's fine without it. You know?
I really saw it as more of a love thing than
it's supposed to be a really symbolic thing.
Sex,
it's supposed to be symbolic of their bond and of leaving childhood and becoming adults. Those are the two big things, right? And that seems pretty straightforward and simple to me, but other people are like, oh, come on, you're talking about 10-year-olds banging. Okay, fine, I guess. The book's like 1,400 pages, and this is 1 page. So, yeah, go nuts.
Yeah.
That's what you want to focus on. That's what you want to focus on.
It's really all it is. It's like a page. Yeah.
It is true, though. I mean, not to contradict what I said earlier, but it is true to a certain extent that some writers obviously are writing what they kind of wish they could do, but that's in a very harmless way. Like, obviously, Tom Clancy wishes he was like had been some sort of secret badass agent. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, Tom Clancy, write books about being a secret badass agent. Somebody has to. Good for you, you know. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. He's pretty good at it, I guess. I've never been into his books, but I like Tons
No,
for Red October. But
I mean, if you write a book about a serial killer instead of going out and doing it yourself, I say, more power to you.
yeah,
Go for it.
I mean, one thing that's actually refreshing about so many of these women that write sort of like the trashy, stupid romance novels is at least they're perfectly transparent about it. They just sort of write about their own sort of sexual fantasy, like, oh, I wish this, dangerous, exciting man could come into my life and blah, 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 blah. It's a fantasy. And they're not ashamed that that's what they put into the work. So, I mean, that's kind of refreshing in a way. Which is, not to turn everything into Twilight again, but is the other thing that's like really sort of annoying about the woman who wrote Twilight is how everything about it is so obviously because of who she is, because she was a bored Mormon housewife.
I was going to say that earlier.
Bored Mormon housewife stuff. And the Mormonism stuff is super strong and prevalent throughout the book. You have teens. Well, teens, I mean, you shouldn't have premarital sex, right? And so what do they have? Well, they can't have sex because the whole thing is, what was it? It's something like, well, if they have sex, Edward will go crazy and eat her or something, right? Like sexual desires is tied up in his bloodlust. Like he can't get her too excited or he'll lose control and hurt her. So that's their little abstinence ring. That's their, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Abstinence ring.
Wait until marriage.
Purity ring.
Yeah.
And then they do get it on because they get married. And when they get it on, it instantly results in a child because when you're a Mormon, that's what sex is for.
Right.
It's not for fun or expression of love. It's just to make kids and stuff. Also, when I talked about how, you have his family, the Cullen family, how they're really nice vampires that don't, they don't murder people, that they don't do the traditional vampire thing. Well, it turns out there's this weird, mean, big group of elitist vampires based in fucking Rome or Italy or something. And they have a problem with what they're doing, which again totally reflects how Mormons feel about Catholicism and specifically the Pope and all that. How they really don't like them and have sort of a rivalry with them and stuff. So it's pretty hilarious when people bring this up in interviews. And she's like, "No, I'm just writing blah blah blah." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, you're a bored Mormon housewife, and all your bored Mormon housewife stuff is in there. That's not a crime. Just admit to it." But anyway.
Hey, she can admit it now. She's made her money.
She certainly has.
Is extremely wealthy.
Once again, I'd like to say thanks for nothing, Anne Rice. I realize that Anne Rice has a lot of people that think she's a legitimately good writer. I don't see it. I've read 4 Anne Rice books, and they're not good. Not a good writer, and I blame her so much for what's happened to vampire fiction. I blame her more than anybody. There's no way you'd have Twilight without Anne Rice. Like the biggest sin against vampires to me is Interview with the Vampire. I have no words to express how much I disapprove of Interview with a Vampire. To me, it's almost everything you can do wrong with vampires. I mean, yes, some of it is just very simple surface stuff. Yes, they're sexy and they're dangerous and they play manipulative games. And yeah, that's all true. That all fits. But just, man, like I had to force myself to read that book, man. Reading that book just made me upset with every page.
I never finished it. It was too boring for me.
It's boring, yeah.
Oh.
And the only reason the movie got anything was because it was Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. Like, that was the big thing, to have those two together.
Oh.
What's funny is I remember when that movie was popular, like, of all people, Oprah Winfrey was criticized it because she thought it was really immoral, which I think is hilarious.
On what grounds? Just the vampires?
Yeah, something about like them being vampires, but also remember that they have like a girl, like a young girl, and they turn her. I think that was a big part of it too. Yeah, like the idea that they were encouraging a child to like embrace this thing, because there's one point where like she, like, I don't know, drinks somebody's blood and she goes like, she says something like, I want some more, or something like that. Like, I got no objection to that, but I think, yeah, that's a thing where like Oprah had Anne Rice, like, or somebody, or maybe it was one of the actors from the movie, and she was saying how like she just, the movie disturbed her and she thought like it was really immoral and like it was really like, I don't know, like some sort of acceptance of evil. I don't know. I can't remember. I wish I could find the footage, because this is literally more than 20 years old memory, and I've never seen it since, but it stuck with me that Oprah was upset about it and thought like, I don't know, maybe she wouldn't be upset about it now. This was 1994, 95 Oprah.
First of all, who the fuck is Oprah? Second of all, like, maybe this movie is not made for you. if you can't handle that, I mean, that's the best part of the movie is when she's the crazy, bloodthirsty vampire at like 10 years old. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Because they're kind of like amused. It's like, oh, we've never done this before. It's like having a fun little pet.
yeah.
She's a pretty little girl. We can dress in pretty little dresses, and then she kills everybody. But yeah, screw you, Anne Rice. Lestat is like one of the worst. Lestat would have been the worst vampire in fiction if not for Twilight, maybe.
But which ones have you read? Just real quick, you read Interview with the Vampire.
Let's see. What's the first sequel to that?
Oh fuck.
Okay, hold on. I'll pull up a list here, and I'm sure I can recognize the titles. I'm pretty sure it was the first sequel to
Queen of the Damned. Is that in there?
I saw the really shitty movie. I don't think I read the book.
The movie was fucking terrible. Had Korn. Yeah. Korn was the music in there, or Jonathan Davis was singing all the parts where he was in the band.
Yeah. The next one was The Vampire Lestat. I read The Vampire Lestat. I read something called Pandora. And I read something else I can't remember. And technically, I didn't mind this. I read all the Sleeping Beauty books that she wrote, but that was because that was part of my relationship with this girl. If anybody doesn't know, the Sleeping Beauty books are these erotic fiction versions of the Sleeping Tale with sex scenes and stuff. And years ago, I lived with my girlfriend, and she had all of them, and we would read them together. And sometimes we would laugh at them, and sometimes not. So I don't really have any objection to them because they are what they are. It's like, okay, it's Sleeping Beauty, but in like a naughty, erotic way. Okay, sure. So don't really have any objection to those, but they're not really serious fiction.
It just seems kind of
okay. No, I didn't read. I didn't read the fourth one. I read 3 of them because the first 3 came out in the 80s. Those ones I read, but apparently she wrote one in 2015. So I did not read that one, but I read the ones from the 80s. But yeah, I can't remember what the other novel was. But Interview with the Vampire and The Vampire Lestat and Pandora. I read all those. They'll suck to me. I mean, again, I get it. Anne Rice has a lot of fans, and no, it's not the same as Twilight. For God's sake, Anne Rice can at least write. She is a competent writer, which is more than I can say for Miss Twilight. His name I can't remember. Stephenie Meyer.
Yeah.
Stephenie Meyer is just she's not a writer, for one thing. We're not going to go on this whole thing, but I mean, a good mark of a bad writer, and she drinks it up, is the overuse of adverbs. Just a little writer tip. Only use an adverb if it's really, really necessary. Don't just throw them in everywhere. She throws them in everywhere. Everywhere. It's ridiculous. Like, it's like Bella's talking to Edward, and he'd be like, "Don't say that," he said darkly. Bullshit like that. Like so stupid and lame.
Yeah.
Like seriously, she couldn't go like a paragraph without like throwing 3 or 4 ridiculous adverbs in. So yeah, that's a very simple writer tip. Keep the adverbs to a minimum.
Yeah, I've heard that she's not a very good writer. That those books are not very good, but.
No, yeah, but that's the thing. It's not like, I mean, everybody talks about, of course, how dumb they are. The characters are dumb. It's a dumb story. But I just mean, just pull all that away. Just her writing itself, the way she expresses thoughts, the way she forms sentences, is bad. It's very bad.
I mean, isn't a lot of YA like that though?
Hit and miss. There's certainly some good YA out there. It's just, this is what happened. In fact, I was a huge fan of YA, but Twilight is another thing that caused like this mountain of really bad YA to get the spotlight and stuff. But no, I read YA back when I was the age, and I've read it as an adult and mostly enjoyed it. There's definitely stuff out there I like. This isn't YA exactly, but actually an author I like passed away today, Ursula Guin, or however you say her name. She was a noted fantasy author. Ursula K.L. or no, sorry, Le Guin, I guess, Guin. Anyway, she was a prolific fantasy writer. She'd written a book. Probably her most famous was like about what was it, like Wizard of the Earth Sea or something like that. I read that 100 years ago. It's quite good. I wouldn't exactly call it YA, but kind of maybe. But anyway, she's definitely an important figure in fantasy, particularly because there aren't really a lot of celebrated women authors from that. And she's definitely up there. But she died today. She wasn't young. She would have been, I think, in her 80s or something. But yeah, she was really old. Yeah, she was 88. So I mean, she lived
Oh wow, yeah.
She lived a good long life. But I mean, it's still sad. It's still sad, and actually, it makes me want to reread that because it was a long time ago. Yeah, I'm not bringing it up as the stuff that I know really well or as a great example of what I'm talking about. I'm just bringing it up because she did die today, and she is somebody that.
Yeah, I'm pretty much.
She wrote a book called The Wizard of Earthsea in the late '60s. Again, this was really rare for women then too. Exactly right. And then she wrote Tales from the Earthsea in 2001, which is just sort of like a collection of short stories set in that world. I think Hayao Miyazaki was a fan of hers. But yeah, she wrote a ton of stuff that I did not read. But maybe now that she's died, I'll look into it. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with a lot of the young adult stuff.
Yeah. But I wouldn't necessarily classify her stuff as exactly young adult anyway, but it was fantasy, and now almost all young adult stuff is fantasy. Like if it's YA, it's probably it's YA fantasy. There's almost like no like real world YA. I mean, there's a little bit. There was a series. It was more like sci-fi than that I used to read years ago called, and there was a ton of books. They're all really short books called Fearless. Do you ever hear of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my sister had those, and I read a bunch of them. They were pretty cool. What sucks is there was going to be a show, and they even made a pilot with Rachel Lee Cook, which was I would have loved because I love Rachel Lee Cook, but it didn't go beyond that stage. But that was some good non-fantasy YA that I read. They weren't amazing books, but it was about this girl, like a result of weird experience. And the whole thing was she didn't have fear, no fear. And she was also really good at beating people up. And there were always people trying to kill her. But she was a super good fighter and stuff like that. And all this stuff happens. I should reread those. I haven't read those in like 15 years. But there were like a bunch of them. But that's sort of a neat example of YA that's not fantasy that I read.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty good. I wonder how many of those they made.
So like...
the main character's name was Gaia, too, which is pretty kick-ass.
So, I mean, this really wasn't a thing until, like, I would say these, recent years with Twilight and all this, Hunger Games and Maze Runner.
Like, yeah, it wasn't really like exploded in, like, the mid-2000s.
But it wasn't really like this is the genre. It just seemed like it was just, like, this is, like, what the Hardy Boys and, like, Babysitter's Club and stuff were, right? Like,
well, sure, that's YA. That's also YA. It's just not YA fantasy.
But it wasn't, like, really... It wasn't like a specific genre before, was it? I mean, it was just like books for younger kids.
Yeah, like I said, YA is anything, but YA fantasy dominates. I think Harry Potter opened the door for that a little.
Sure. Yeah, I forgot about Harry Potter. It just...
I mean, technically, most YA is more sophisticated than a lot of Harry Potter in its writing style. Which is saying something, because Harry Potter is not like silly children's books. They're sophisticated and they're long and they're complicated, but it just means still. I think every Harry Potter is written from the standpoint that if you're 12, you can totally get it. I wouldn't go younger than that. Whereas some YA is definitely for people older than 12, especially the stuff that has sexy stuff in it.
Yeah,
maybe that's what's ruining society. No, I don't think so. I think it's good.
It's it's really just exploded as far as the popularity. More sex.
More sexy YA stuff. Oh, there's some really weird stuff out there too that gets really complicated that I haven't read, that I've just like read stuff about online, like teenage girls having like sex with like, I don't know, centaurs that are their half brothers, and weird shit.
Oh wow, I'm on board for that. I need to pick that up.
How many Fearlesses were there?
Well, I read the new 50 Shades of Grey in my bubble bath.
Yeah. That might even be a level lower than Stephanie Meyer as far as competent writing goes, but we'll be here all night if we start talking about what's wrong with that. I mean, this isn't even an exaggeration that I could write a better novel on a napkin than 50 Shades of Grey. Like, that's true. How many Fearless books were there? Let's see. There were 36 from the normal thing. Then there was something called Fearless FBI, which came well after I'd stopped reading them. There's 4 of those, and there's something. Then there are super editions. But yeah, I read at least like the first 12. So that would have been 99 and 2000. I am more. Yeah. Well, they're pretty cool.
Has this not been made into a movie?
No, that's what I said. It hasn't been made into anything. They filmed a pilot for it with Rachel Lee Cook in the lead, but it didn't get picked up, and that was the end of it.
Okay.
I think it lends itself well to a movie. You could probably take the plot of several of the novels and combine them and make a pretty decent movie. I mean, you'd think it would really be all the rage now, too, because the lead would be a teenage girl that's, really tough and stuff, which is a really big deal right now. Because, like, Gaia spends most of her time just beating the shit out of people. It's really what she does. Yeah, she's just like, she's just sort of like a girl Batman, but without a costume, because she's just, like, proficient in martial arts, but she's also, like, a genius-level intellect, and, she's just amazing. She's super badass. And she's incapable of feeling fear, which makes her able to do things.
It almost sounds like, have you ever heard of I Am Number 4?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Sounds similar to that.
Wow, there's some crazy stuff in here that happened after I stopped reading. Like, she had a younger brother that had the ability to see auras? What the fuck does that even mean? That far, yeah. I think I read the first 12. But this must have been after that. But yeah, that's the other thing. Like, her father's like some sort of CEI field agent that like trained her or something. I don't know. It's like every sort of like cliche you can imagine when it comes to like young adult that's not fantasy and like spy stuff. But it's still entertaining. I liked them. I genuinely liked them. So yeah. Anyway, my point was that's an example of YA that I like. That's not YA fantasy. Go revisit sometime. Gaia Moore. But anything else on Let the Right One In? Like we said, we don't want to go too much because we're going to do the remake next week, and then we can do some compare and contrast stuff too. I saw the remake only once, so I forget a lot of it.
Yeah, I'm the same.
I mean, I remember the main gist of it. As I said, I think the thing I like the best about the original compared to the remake is the performance by the girl playing Ely. I just think she's a lot better. She just seems dangerous. Like, you see it when you look at it. She seems sort of feral and dangerous and wild and dark. She has sort of an aura of darkness about her that I didn't really get from the character as played by Chloe Grace Moretz.
Yeah, I was actually wanting to go watch the remake anyway, before we even talked about doing this film.
Holy shit, there's an epilogue just to the book. Lindquist wrote a short story called Let the Old Dreams Die, following what happened to Oscar and Ely after they got off the train.
Oh fuck.
So there is some closure there of some sort. I'll have to look into that.
Where do you find that?
It was on the Wikipedia page of the novel.
Oh shit. I want to read it. But yeah, I don't remember much about the remake, but I actually like Chloe Grace Moretz as an actress. I think she does a pretty good job. It's just a completely different look for the character than Ely in the original film.
She's still so young. She's still only 20.
I love the look of the film because it's it's constantly contrasted with the white snow. You've got blood on the snow, and then you've got the really, really pale skin of Oscar.
Yeah, I like all that too. One thing that I love about a lot of these Scandinavian movies, they really make good use of like the backgrounds and the snow and stuff and
Yeah,
the darkness.
yeah,
This actually has quite a bit in common with other sort of Nordic movies that we've seen, even though that's not part of it. Like, obviously, um, Insomnia, a big part of Insomnia is bleak landscapes and
yeah,
dark skies and stuff, and you see some of that, even though
yeah.
that's
They
in Norway
accomplished
and this is in Sweden.
the same thing here. It's even the shots that are outdoors, it's just so dreary and gloomy.
Yeah, see,
Um,
that's another problem with the remake. The remake is in New Mexico,
oh,
which
jeez.
is sort of a warm, pleasant place, right?
So it's not in the snow at all.
No, 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 no.
Okay.
So yeah, so that will
Well, I
break the
mean,
snow.
I got to respect that for them not doing it in like Alaska or
Yeah,
Wisconsin
sure.
or shit. Um,
Although, in fairness to the remake of Insomnia, they pretty much had to do it in Alaska.
yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah,
what's the point? Otherwise, it just doesn't work at all. But that's a movie that's very much based on geography.
yeah.
Whereas this, the geography is a little different. But
But yeah, they actually switched the. It was like 81 is where the book takes place, like in the summer, and then they actually switched this to February of 82, I believe.
yeah,
Is when it starts for the amount of snow that was on the ground. So it would be more snow,
uh,
would be more believable.
and speaking of things that got pilots, this got a pilot, but they didn't go anywhere.
The TNT didn't pick
Yeah,
it up.
yeah, it started with A&E, and then TNT didn't pick it up. TNT ordered a pilot. Blah, 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 yeah.
I'm kind of glad. I feel like that
Well,
would.
yeah, not everything needs to be a TV series, for God's sakes, right?
How would you even do this? I mean, maybe a miniseries, but
I know. It's just supposed to be their continuing adventures. Just turn it into like one of those roaming around shows like from the 80s, like where they just go to small towns and solve problems and then move on. I don't know. It'd be stupid.
yeah,
Not everything needs to be a television series, for
it's
God's sake.
it's also a little too mature for cable. I think too. It's I mean, what would they just be
Right.
like grinding on each other? Like that would be the later scenes after they get off the train.
God, I hope not. Yeah, don't even want to think about that.
Oh yeah, that's what that epilogue's all about.
I'll have to look into it. But I don't think so, given the comments of the author.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, and speaking of which, another reason why this was a good movie adaptation is because the author himself wrote the screenplay.
Yeah. And I actually just realized this is the same director that did The Snowman.
Yeah. So he could be a
Which
competent
was a
director.
terrible movie.
It just shows what happens. Like, yeah, everything about that movie was an absolute disaster. It wasn't even really finished when they released it, which is pretty funny. Which makes me just want to see how bad. No, but I've just heard what a train record it is in every respect, and like how it's almost nonsensical at certain points. Because like literally like there are certain scenes that are supposed to be in there that they just never finished or filmed or whatever. Like it's missing a whole bunch of parts and stuff.
Right. I don't really know that it's the director's fault necessarily. They basically just they edited it all together on their own.
Yeah,
Studio.
I mean, clearly he's a good director who can do good stuff. So it's unfortunate when something like that happens. But it's funny. In continuing this vein, I'm not saying for soon, but since we've already done, since we're gonna do this and Let Me In, and we already did both versions of Insomnia, and we did both versions of Night Watch. It seems inevitable that we're gonna do The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, right? Because that's another big Swedish movie that got a big slick American remake.
I haven't seen the remake. I don't like David Fincher.
It's a pretty good remake, but again, you don't need it. Like everything that needs to be done is in the other. And
we should do the Old Boy remake.
No, I don't want to go that far. I was thinking of the more Swedish Norwegian movies being remade.
Yeah.
Because actually, when I was talking about like Swedish movies that people know, like that's the other big one, this Girl with Dragon Tattoo.
Yep.
Unless you're a cinephile and you're into Ingmar Bergman, which I am, and we will eventually do at least one of his, I think.
Yeah, I think we had a few on the list.
Yeah, one was
Persona?
Persona. Yeah, I think we should definitely do Persona. So yeah, we'll at least do one or two of those. I like Persona a lot. Very
Sure.
cool, minimalistic film. I mean, it's basically just two women almost the entire time. It's very almost, but it's just fascinating the way they interact with each other and stuff. And speaking of like risque stuff, that movie came out in like what 1966. It's
Yeah.
not content. It's not content that you see, but just stuff that's talked about and implied. That's pretty out there and daring. That certainly wouldn't have been. You couldn't make an American version of that in 1966. No way.
Yeah. That was back when like Alfred Hitchcock was risque for showing the toilet.
Yeah. He's so artistic. Look at that shot. The seat is down.
Yeah, just a different time.
But yeah, I was thinking like on the lines of that, we would just sort of do like maybe a little series where we just sort of do like some of the greats, right? Like a Hitchcock, like a Bergman, stuff like that. I know that for the longest time we had at least one viewer that really wanted us to do that Russian director whose name, of course, I can't remember. Andrei Tarkovsky.
Yep.
So yeah, maybe going forward we'll do some of those, or a Kurosawa, some of those big international names.
Sure. Maybe some of the lesser known films by some of those guys.
Yeah, not necessarily the big. Like I said, Persona, I think, is more in the middle. Because I think what everybody thinks of when they think of Bergman is, the Seventh Seal right off, which is a great film. I really like it, but Persona might be a better one to do.
Yeah, Kurosawa's got one. I mean, he's got a huge catalog.
Yep.
Yeah. I'd be open to do any of his.
Yeah, love Kurosawa. And actually, not that I liked him more than Kurosawa, but he's like the most prevalent of like sort of a trifecta of Japanese directors, and he sort of overshadows the other ones. And the one I like the most is Yasujiro Ozu, who timeline wise was the earliest. He even made a bunch of silent films, but almost all of them are lost now. But I mean, he most of his big films were in the 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, the big one that everybody knows is Tokyo Story, but he did a lot of really great films, and they're definitely not the sort of things that you would see like a lot of the casual movie fan be into, or anybody like on the Sausage Factory talk about, because they're titled black and white movies, and also in the case of Ozu, like they are basically contemporary dramas. They're not there's not action, there's not fantasy, sci-fi. They're about people living now and like dealing with ordinary things like family issues and stuff like that. Which I understand. Some people are just like, that's too boring for me with movies. But some of those they're just so well done. They're just really captivating.
Have you seen Good Morning?
I have not seen that one.
That's been one that's been on my list for a while. I want to check that one out.
Is that Ozu?
Uh-huh.
Oh, right. I'm trying to remember when that is.
This is actually Michael Cera recommended it on one of Criterion Corner's videos on YouTube.
Nice.
That's when I put it on my list.
That's interesting. Michael Cera is okay. Yeah, he's an okay guy. Well, I just mean it's so fashionable to hit on, he's just he's a hipster douche. I get the same sort of shit as he does. People have compared me to him. Fine, whatever. I don't.
He's been typecast.
I like Pinkerton a lot too. The album, that's his favorite album, and I have to say I like it.
Sure.
But the ones that I know pretty well are the ones that usually have the seasons in them, like early spring, late spring, early summer. I really like early spring. It's just basically because it's just a really interesting view into like it came out in 56, so it's about an office worker in Japan in 56, and it's about this guy, and he has an affair with like one of his coworkers, and I don't know, it's just really interesting to me, like this, because it's so different. Because it's like, yeah, this is what offices were like back, like when offices were becoming a thing, you know, and everywhere, not just Japan and stuff. I don't know. I really like it. It's long though, that one compared to he isn't known for long films, but that one's longish. It's not long, but it's like I think it's like 2.5 hours, which is long for him. But good. No, I have not seen Good Morning. I've seen I've seen Early Spring, Late Spring, and Tokyo Story. I think those are the only ones I've seen. But there's at least 3 or 4 others. There's the sneeze. It took an hour. It took me a goddamn hour to get that sneeze out. But the good news is it's done. I usually sneeze once or twice.
Oh, okay.
My mother has like allergies, and I feel bad because I always make fun of her. My mother, with hyperbole, can sneeze like 40 times in a row. Yeah. And I mean, I feel bad. That must be terrible. But
yeah, I've seen people that sneeze quite a lot like that. Or usually, I'm probably more of a three times.
I think my all-time record might be 5, and like my head almost exploded when it finished because after I sneezed twice, every other sneeze was just a massive surprise. I was like, "What is happening? What is going on? I keep sneezing," and that's only 5. But no, that was just the one sneeze it was building. But, yeah, I love Ozu, and then probably the least known of the 3 is the middle guy, who of course last name starts with an M. I can't remember. He's the guy that does a lot of the period pieces. A lot of his stuff is about stuff in like of course now I'm blanking on the name of periods and stuff, but like, oh, for God's sake, why can't I think?
The Bronze Age or something? I don't know what you're going for.
No, not that far. More like 1600s, 1700s Japan. What the fuck is it called? Oh my God, it's like the same era that like Lone Wolf and Cub is set in.
Mizoguchi.
Yeah, that's the guy. But or it's similar to that. But oh, for God's sakes, I'm just gonna have to look up what the name of the era is because it's driving me insane. What era it actually is from? Oh, the Tokugawa era. Okay. So around there. That's not even specifically. But anyway, my point is that guy, his stuff was all set there. Is he the same guy that did that really good Ghost Story? Yeah. Kenji Mizoguchi. That film Ugetsu, or we're going to say it, one I've seen by him. That might be a good one to do sometime. It's a really interesting film.
I don't know that I've seen anything by him.
That's the only one I've seen. That's the Sengoku period, which would have been the end of the 1400s, coming into the beginning of the 1600s. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, he's the middle one of the big 3. He's the more forgotten one, and almost all his stuff are period pieces, which were quite in vogue at the time. Actually, even though he's the forgotten one, at the time he was very well known because that was very popular. That's what Japanese audiences were sort of most interested at the time. But Ugetsu is a really, really great film. It has ghosts, which is pretty cool.
It's always a plus.
He has a lot of lost films too, actually, because he was doing films back in the 20s as well, and a lot of those are lost. But anyway, those 3 are sort of like the big major Japanese film guys, and Kurosawa is the one everybody else knows. The other 2 are lesser known unless you're particularly into film or Japan or something like that. So it'd be nice to do maybe one of each of those guys at some point. Ugetsu wouldn't be a bad one. He also did one of the many, 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 many versions of the 47 Ronin. There's like,
I was gonna say,
there's like 700 movies based on that. He did one back in the 40s. But there were so many. Yeah, Ugetsu is actually one of the last movies he did, but it came out in 1953. Really great, somber movie. Anyway, as we said, going forward, we'll try to hit some of those big international directors, maybe do a series of that or something. But for next week, we're looking at the flip side to this, our remake, Let Me In. So we can do some compare and contrast. Anything else about Let the Right One In? I'm trying to think.
I know we talked a lot about the the sexuality, of what the actual gender was of of Ellie, and they went back and they overdubbed her voice with a more masculine sounding woman.
Wow.
So because it was very, I would imagine a little girl has a pretty, sounds like a little girl's voice. So they went back and that's why some of it looks so weird, because it is a dub, and even though it's a foreign language dub, it
no. See, I had no idea she was dubbed. That was lost on me.
Yeah, see, I'd like to hear the original voice now, just for comparison.
Her name was Lena Leanderson.
But I thought that was interesting.
She'd be 22 now.
Yep, she's not really doing a whole lot. I know the guy that plays Oscar is still working. He has a TV show that he's on. Swedish.
He's like he's so pale. He looks like, which is par for the course in Sweden. If you're looking for pale kids with blue eyes and really light blonde hair, Sweden's the place to go. But he reminds me of the kid that played Charlie in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Got that same sort of waifish look, and really pale features, really pale hair.
I mean, it's not even like pink; it's like white, like it's stark white.
Yeah. He's just like one level up from albino.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a pale person. People often remark to me, which is not really a good thing to say. It's kind of like when people, like I said, telling people, like when people tell you you're skinny, that's not cool. Somebody takes your shirt off, you don't go, "Whoa, you're fat!" Like people don't do that. I know that's rude. But when I was younger and I had when I was less healthy and my stomach issues and I was underweight, like people would remark all the time that I was skinny.
Yeah.
Which I think is really rude. But anyway, I'm pretty healthy weight now and stuff, and I don't have that anymore. But I am a pale person, and people like to remark on that, which is never a positive thing, because basically what they're saying is, "Wow, you look unhealthy." No one's saying, pale is a good look, I like it. No, like they always seem like, "Are you sick? Are you feeling okay?"
It
makes me feel good to see somebody that's more pale, I suppose is what I mean. There's more pale people out there than me, for God's sakes.
If you could beat this Oscar guy, you may need to go take some vitamins or something.
Yeah. He's the vampire. You can't put him out in the sun.
That's a good point. But especially him and his blonde hair. It's just so fair,
What's interesting is when they were doing the casting for the roles, they didn't specify that Ely had to be a boy or girl. They weren't really sure what they were going to go with. And the advertisement said they were seeking a 12-year-old boy or girl that was good at running, which is weird because I don't remember her doing a whole lot of running. But
I run good. I'm going to try out.
They show the other kids doing like gym class and stuff, but she doesn't go to school, so she's not doing that. I also thought like one of the things that does sort of remind you that it's like the early 80s, even though like a lot of it's easy to not think about it, is when they do like the school trip out to the pond or the lake. That nowadays liability issues and stuff like through the roof.
Hell, yeah.
Can you imagine parents like find out like the school took their kids out on like some frozen lake somewhere? I mean, even in Sweden, where it's a more normal thing, like they'd just be like, they'd be like, no way. So.
Well, I would think that, God, it's so cold there. It's got to be like frozen solid, right?
Yeah, but there's always parts that are not. They even mentioned it at one point. He's saying, "Watch out for the ice pit," and they're like, "It's ice hole" or something like that. There's always parts that are. I mean, as someone who has skated on some frozen lakes and ponds in my day, I never felt good about it. I was just like, I can't believe my parents used to do this all the time.
Yeah.
I never felt good doing it. It'd be like minus 15, the ice would be solid, and all I could think about was all the water that was under me.
Really? Oh, wow. I assume that was a normal thing.
Well, I mean, it is a normal thing, but just for me personally, I guess, like it. I mean, I don't know. It's less normal now. like I said, there's
So you
plenty
never
of...
played hockey like on a pond?
Yeah, I did.
Oh.
Yeah, I did. But like I said, I was never completely comfortable doing it.
You're always afraid you're going to fall in.
Yeah, and as we said, there were always sections you definitely had to avoid and stuff like that. I think I've only played hockey on like a pond once. The other times it was just skating.
Mm-hmm.
Can't do any skating today. The temperature got way up, and it's been raining and raining and raining. There's still snow out there, and everything's a horrible slushy mess. When I went downtown today, I mean, I have really good boots, and I still had to watch where I step because like the water was like more than ankle deep in some spots, and the slush.
Wow.
Yeah, just like all the sidewalks just turn into these slushy lakes. Nothing quite like rain in January, because it's like not freezing rain. It's as cold as rain can be without freezing. Like, I don't know. A lot of people live their lives without experiencing that. It's an interesting.
But then it does freeze, right? Like tonight, that rain's going to freeze, and the roads will be icy.
What's weird? Okay, it's a really weird day today. So it was pretty much normal temperature the last few days, like a little bit below zero. And then early this morning, it started to warm up and get closer to zero. And by the time I went out today, around, I guess, 11-ish or something, it was just about 0 or -1. Or yeah, it was going from the minus into the 0. And it was warming up all afternoon. It warmed up. Right now, it's about 8 degrees, which is really warm for January. And by midnight, which is like only about an hour away, it's supposed to be about 10 or 11. Then it's finally going to fall sometime in the early morning next year. Yeah, so a lot of stuff will be frozen. But I wonder, it's probably doing a number on the snow because, I don't know. There was a brief period where it did stop raining, but yeah. It's going to be pretty messy. I was seeing the stuff on my Twitter feed about Halifax Transit and stuff, the buses running slow and all this stuff just because of the mess it is. But it's just weird. That's been this winter. It's been wild temperature swings. Really, really wild temperature swings, like within a day. But we've only had a brief period of the super cold temperatures. The few days after Christmas were super cold. But we haven't had a day like that since, I don't know, maybe the 2nd or 3rd of January. It's been a long time. It's been mostly hovering around 0, which is warm. But as I said, a few days ago when we had all that snow, it was great. Everything looked beautiful. And I went out and I took some pictures when I went to the public gardens, and it all looked great and stuff. But now everything looks like shit. And the rain just messes everything up. It looks like terrible. And yeah, and there's snow full of dirt and stuff. It's ugh. So, I don't know. It would be nice if the temperature would go down and we just get a thin layer of snow to like cover the dirt, but I don't know what's going to happen the next few days. But yeah, it's warm and getting warmer right now, which is really, really weird.
Yep, I think that same thing came through here earlier in the week, or maybe late last week.
The wind's picking up too. At least it wasn't windy when I was out. It was colder when I was out, and the rain was coming down straight. But now it's warmer, less rain, more wind. I don't know. It's just been very fluid. And no consistency. Everything, it just keeps changing, which I guess is pretty similar. You always hear that joke. No matter where you are in the world, or at least in Canada or in the US, you always hear that joke. If you don't like the weather in blah, 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 wait an hour. You live. Everybody says it. Doesn't seem to matter where you live. Everybody just talks about how changeable their weather is. It doesn't matter where they live. But that's definitely been the case this winter. It's been a very uneven winter. But yeah, it is true that the CGI in this has some hiccups. I mean, and they really tried on the cat thing too. I mean, they did use real cats, fake cats, and CGI cats. You know, they did try, and apparently the scene took them a few weeks to do, so it still doesn't look so great in some parts, but they did put effort into it.
It looks so bad. I would almost rather not see this scene at all.
You're way more sensitive to that than I am. I don't know. Maybe my eyes aren't as good. I mean, I can recognize bad CG, but I don't the way you do.
Yeah. That is a pet peeve. Well, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I can notice it obviously in the more primitive things like Mortal Kombat Annihilation or something, but I don't know. The stuff made most of the 2000s looks pretty okay to me.
Yeah.
sort of that I have noticed, but no, I don't notice it most of the time. A lot of the time, I have to rewatch it, and somebody like you or somebody else says like, and then when I rewatch it, if I'm looking for it, I see it and says, "Yeah, I didn't even really notice it as much with the cat thing here."
Yeah. It's just something that takes me out of the film.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I get that. I don't know what it is about me that I don't pick up on it as much, but I don't. Just like I never ever until people started talking about what lens flares were, I never ever saw them. Now I see them, but I never saw them until people pointed them out to me and talked about them. Because obviously, like the big thing J.J. Abrams does,
Yeah.
all this film. I watch Star Trek and people talk about the lens flares. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like honestly, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not that visual of a person. Now that they've been pointed out to me and I know what to look for, I see them. But I don't see these things until people point them out to me most of the time.
I don't really have a problem with lens flares. I haven't
No,
seen a lot of.
I just mean it's just another visual thing that I don't pick up on. Is all I mean. Like there's
I,
certain visual things in movies I apparently don't pick up on until somebody else points it out for me.
I haven't seen the new Star Trek movies. I haven't seen a lot of stuff J.J. Abrams has done, but nothing I can think of. Like he didn't even direct Cloverfield, did he? He just produced it. So
I never saw Cloverfield. I saw the weird not sequel. John Goodman. I mean,
yeah,
it just says Cloverfield, but I mean, I get it. It's sort of like it's like Cloverfield from a completely different point of view type thing. I don't know.
yeah.
I'm not gonna get into that, but man, like, I mean, I appreciated what it was going for, and John Goodman was good and all, but it was not the movie I wanted to see. And that ending, like, it's a love it or hate it ending. I just thought the ending was ridiculous. But
I liked it.
yeah,
I mean, it's because I've seen the first Cloverfield, and
yeah, and I never did, but I knew what the first
yeah.
Cloverfield was. But it's like everything about a movie I hate, like.
Well, the entire
Jerky like with the city of Pete carrying his camera. Why?
it's handheld, yeah, and it doesn't hold up well.
I just can't get past those things and stuff. But again, I'm not going to go on a big tangent about found footage and stuff like that.
And in its defense, it was on the early end of that found footage trend, so it's not like it was doing something that had been done to death at that point, but it has been done to death now. I don't know. It's like almost like a giant kaiju, giant monster kaiju movie that is found footage, which is an interesting idea.
To be fair, I've never been a fan of the pure kaiju. Like that's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
They're a little too hammy for me, I guess.
Sure, I'm not the biggest fan
speaking
either.
Speaking of that, so a Godzilla anime series or miniseries has arrived on Netflix. Kind of interested to watch that though.
I didn't even know about it.
Yeah, looks pretty cool. It should be on American, I figure. I don't see why it wouldn't be. So I'm going to try to watch that over the next few weeks and not push it to the side. Anyway, well, yeah, I mean, this movie was very well received, critically and everything else. It's one of the, as we said, it's one of the few sort of foreign films that broke through, really. Even though it broke through, they still saw fit to make a remake, which is kind of stupid, but you can understand why, as we said, maybe the success of some of these YA things really made them, oh yeah, of course, we got vampire romance, so let's do an English one. Like, I get it and stuff. Roger Ebert praised the movie very much, said it was like the best modern vampire movie, which is... I don't know what he means by modern, like what era he means, but I mean, is it the best vampire movie of the 2000s? Probably.
Yeah. I would definitely say so.
I mean, 30 Days a Night is great, but it's not as deep of a movie or anything.
Yeah.
And after that, like, I know a lot of people like What We Do in the Shadows. I haven't seen that yet, but a lot of people say that's really cool.
It's good. It's much more of a, horror comedy
type thing. Yeah.
But, it's well done though.
Yeah. So that's a movie. That's another one of those movies that I heard about like ages ago and have just kept putting off watching, putting it off. But I will get around to it.
And I had no idea about this Godzilla animated thing.
I didn't either until suddenly the friggin' I turned on Netflix and like the little preview thing popped up for it, the little trailer, and I was like, "Oh, this looks cool." So.
You may also like this.
But yeah, my UA also likes. They're hilarious. They're also very sad. Sometimes they're so sad I post them on Twitter because some of it I know I do to myself. Like most of it is completely random, but some of it I know I do to myself because I do have a penchant for watching like terrible comedies that I know I won't like that I just put on anyway.
Yeah, you do that.
Yeah,
you saw like Office Christmas Party and stuff.
yeah. Like, I mean, I know it's gonna suck. I mean, I just put them on for background noise, I guess, but
Yeah,
I still try to pay attention and just to say I see them. But yeah, Office Christmas Party is a particular low, really, because it's barely a movie. Like, there's bad movies, sure, like that's a bad comedy. Like, it's hard to even call Office Christmas Party a movie. It's just more like it's a bunch of stuff, you know. But, continuing the tradition of SNL trying to turn like, little sketches into full feature-length movies. It worked like twice. It worked with Wayne's World, and I guess the very first time it worked with Blues Brothers. As far as I know, that's the only time it ever worked. Like, was the Ladies Man a good movie?
Yeah, it was very successful.
Was Superstar a good movie? The Night of the Roxbury?
Not yet. That's the one I was going to say.
I mean, these are all.
Oh God, there's more.
They were all sketches that became movies, which is retarded. Office Christmas Party wasn't even a sketch. It was a song. It was like a music video. It wasn't like a sketch with characters and dialogue. It was simply like a music video song with like just a montage of people getting crazy at a Christmas party. And they're like, movie. Do it up, Lauren. And Lauren's like, I stopped caring 25 years ago.
I think that show's pretty much just run its course as far as being relevant. They're trying harder and harder to focus on younger audiences, and it's unwatchable for me now. But like I think it's all.
There's no talent on that show anymore. Like there was always at least a couple people that could hold it together a little bit. There is not anymore. There is nothing. Like you can say what you want about like how uninspired a lot of like say the 2000s were, but Bill Hader was a legit good guy. And even Andy Samberg to a certain extent. They were legit talents that could do things and hold it together even when everything else sucked. They don't have that. They don't have anybody.
I mean, like Fred Armisen.
Yeah, he's kind of underrated. I don't love him. Like I don't care about any of his television work, but he still works.
Yeah, I agree. It's
But now they got nobody. Like absolutely nobody. And what's really weird is like I guess they've always had like their templates, like who's going to be the new Belushi, who's going to be the new this, who's going to be new that,
who's going to be the fat guy, who's going to be the black guy.
Yeah, well, the black guy, that's the one thing that won't change. Kenan Thompson is just going to die before he leaves that show. He's still there.
He's the longest cast member. He beat out like Tim Meadows or someone.
Tim Meadows sucks, man. Well, I don't like him.
The ladies' man, come on.
Yeah, I really don't like him. And I like how he keeps getting work because he's friends with Tina Fey.
Yeah.
Like he's in Mean Girls. I think he shows up in some episodes of 30 Rock and stuff like that.
Yeah, he does a lot of TV work.
Yeah, he was on that horrible show that lasted one season with another SNL alum, the one with the animated guy. It's like voiced by I can't remember his name. The guy that's like shit. Hold on. Okay.
Animated.
Think. Yeah, it's like a live action show, but the one main guy is animated. He's this big barbarian guy. You never heard of this? I thought you knew more about TV than I did.
Not Archer or something like that.
No, Archer's fully. That's awesome, by the way. Archer's just a fully animated show. No, it has only existed for one season, and then they canceled it.
Sounds familiar.
Son of something. Son of Zorn. Called Son of Zorn. Everybody in it is live action except for Zorn. Zorn is voiced by Jason Sudeikis.
Oh God, I hate Jason Sudeikis.
And the idea is it's like completely normal contemporary world, right? Everybody's normal, everything's normal, except you have this big animated Conan the Barbarian looking guy voiced by him, and he's moved to town to be closer to his son, and he had a wife who he's now divorced from, who is now married to Tim Meadows. and it's like how he has to adjust to being like an ordinary office worker and stuff. And it just suggests that he's from this other country, and the other country's all animated and all, like fucking heavy metal and stuff like that, right? Like he just comes from a country like that, full of bullshit like that. And it's all about how he has to like suppress his crazy like barbarian urges and fit into society. And speaking of Michael Cera, his son is basically a poor man's Michael Cera.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it now. I remember the advertisements. Is it Cheryl? Oh yeah, the boy.
His name is Johnny Pemberton, and he's basically a watered down. Yeah, but anyway, I watched the entire first season on Netflix like several months ago, and it's not terrible, but you can definitely understand why it didn't do well. But yeah, Jason Sudeikis sucks.
Yeah, I hate Jason Sudeikis. He ruins movies for me.
What movies is he in? I'm sure I've seen him in movies. I just can't think right now. Okay, here's his filmography. Let's see. He was in Semi-Pro, but he wasn't important in that. He was just a 10. Oh, right. He was in We're the Millers. I give We're the Millers kind of a pass. It's not terrible. It has one really great moment. Just one. And it's when... So, did you see the movie?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's when after he's made the plan that he's going to do this, and he needs to, like... He knows the boy. He's like, you look fine. But the girl's all goth and punk and stuff. Yeah. He's like, you need to get fixed. And then he has to go and he gets himself the haircut. And he's like, what can I do for it? He's like, give me the... And he goes on like this long spiel. And it's just like, work at this office till I die, kissing my stupid boss's ass so I can bring home money for my shrew of a wife and my ungrateful kids, blah, 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 dickhole, but like that. It's like, just give me that one. And suddenly some guy, like in a suit sitting nearby, says, hey, right here. I thought that was really great. The rest of the movie is that. But that was one good moment. Is that the only thing I've seen him in? I hate Horrible Bosses. I thought that was terrible. Yeah. They actually made a sequel to that, which is hilarious because the people involved didn't even want to make it. I think that's all I've seen.
He's turned into like the it guy. I haven't seen Downsizing. I'm probably not going to see
I know that he's in the movie Race, and Race is in no way a comedy. Like, that's a straightforward drama in Race. And he's been in Downsizing.
That's about Jesse Owens.
Yeah. Oh, he was in a movie I kind of like. It's called A Good Old Fashioned Orgy. Now, it's not really funny, and it's not really memorable. The only thing I like about it is that it doesn't do the expected, because the whole point is it's like this group of friends, and he's one of them. And for some reason, they're bored with each other or their friendship, and they decide to plan an orgy. And it's about like how awkward and silly and ridiculous all that is and stuff, and how, of course, they find out how they really feel about each other, all that bullshit, right? But usually, I think the main thing most audiences expect is they find out, well, we better not do that. They actually go through with it, and I like the movie for that reason. That's the only reason. Will Forte's in there, too. My God. I don't even remember. But I remember I saw it a few years ago, and I was like, well, this should be some predictable bullshit. And most of it was, but how it actually turned out wasn't. Because basically what it shows is, like, not only do they actually go through with it, but it has a positive impact in all their lives, which I think is hilarious. That, like, there's a group of friends, guys and girls, all have an orgy together and somehow come out of it, like, with a stronger friendship. I don't think that's realistic, but I think it's funny. Anyway, yeah. But, yeah, so I've only seen him in, like, 4 or 5 movies, but... Yeah. He does have a good voice for that show he was supposed to do. Like, it's a good voice for a barbarian, but it's a stupid show, and don't watch it.
Yeah, he's but yeah, guess we can go ahead and wrap it up now.
Yeah. Yeah, nowadays, there's just nobody on SNL with any talent. I know, because I keep dutifully at least throwing it on, like in between hockey games on Saturday night. I flip over, I'm like, let's see what's going on here. And they're like, Trump. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's...
I mean, again, I get it. I understand the situation. You can't ignore it, but, it still is tiring.
It just seems redundant. I mean, does it not?
Yeah. the good news is I don't think he's lasting another year. I don't think there's any way. And that's not me being tired of it. That's just me being a realistic, rational person. So maybe that'll lead to better sketches, because that'll be interesting, I guess. Some sort of weird emergency replacement or vice president becoming president. I mean, that has room for comedic possibilities, right? I don't know. As long as North Korea doesn't nuke everybody, which he loves daring them to do. He's like, please nuke us. I fucking dare you. Come on, nuke us. We don't even need Alaska. But yes, let's wrap. So that was Let the Right One In. One of several of our Scandinavian type films that we've done, and now continuing that tradition, we will follow that up with the inevitable American remake, Let Me In. So we're going to be doing that for next week, which won't have the same bleak winter feel because it's in New Mexico, but perhaps that's a bold new direction they wanted to go for. But this winter thing, it wasn't really anything serious we were doing. It was just kind of a mood. So we'll see how our mood strikes us after that. But at least for now, we can tell you for sure next week the plan is Let Me In. So please join us for that.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. All right, that's going to do it for this week. We'll wrap. Thanks a lot. I'm Cole. That's Jay from the Pocket Dimension. We say thanks a lot. We will see you again really soon. Have a good one. Peace.
Thank you.